The chapel was dark, unlit save for the last golden flicker of a sconce near the altar. Eleanor moved like a ghost through it, shoes in hand, breath trembling, veil slipping from her hair. In her palm, a folded piece of paper, crumpled, worn soft at the edges from hours of hesitation. She tucked it beneath the old prayer cushion near the back pew. If anyone found it, they would know everything. She hadn't cried, not yet, but her jaw ached from holding back the sob that wished to drag her knees to the stone floor. She was not meant to be here. She was meant to be in the rose parlor, sipping jasmine tea and listening to Madame Chastain explain how to blush when a gentleman asked for one's hand. Instead, she was here, in the chapel, leaving behind a letter for a man who wasn't her betrothed and who was never supposed to look at her like that. 12 days earlier, he had first appeared behind the holly hedge by the kitchen wing. Not at all how a man should enter a woman's life. Not gallantly nor gallopingly, but half covered in mud, carrying a sack of grain over his back like a brute, then dropping it when he spotted her. She had not meant to smile, but she had, and he had not meant to bow, yet he did, fumbling his fingers against the hem of a jacket, too fine for a servant, too threadbare for a gentleman. "I'm told you are Miss Fairmont," he said. His voice was far too sure for a man with dirt on his cheek. She tilted her head. "And you are clearly lost," he grinned. "Then I am at least in excellent company." A breath caught in her chest, brief, ridiculous. The governess called her back inside, and that should have been the end of it. But the next morning he was still there, and the next, and the next. His name was Marcus Thorne, a new addition to the Earl's staff, brought on, she was told, to assist with the stables. Then later she heard he'd been reassigned to the steward's office, then again to the household inventories. No one seemed to know precisely where he belonged, only that he walked as if the marble floors belonged to him, and spoke like a man unafraid of being overheard. "Your cousin," he said once, pausing as he carried a vase past the west drawing room, "wishes to marry a title, not a man." She'd glanced up. "And what is it you wish for, Mr. Thorne?" He didn't answer, just held her gaze a moment too long. She heard her own heart thump in her chest and cursed it for being so loud. She tried to avoid him. For 2 days she remained in the music room, then the library. Then she asked to go walking in the garden just before dusk, hoping the house would quiet without him. But he was there too. Of course he was, standing by the crumbling statue of Athena, with one foot up on the plinth, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a worn leather ledger open in his hand.
"Was that a presumption?" She paused. He held out the ledger. "There's a phrase here, scribbled in the margin twice. Omnia vincit." She reached slowly for it. "Omnia vincit amor. Love conquers all." He raised his eyes. "Perhaps," she added, "not in this house." It was only after she found the letter in her coat pocket that she began to realize what had been happening between them. Not a letter written to her, but a note she was meant to discover, folded once, very neatly. Her name was not on it, but her glove was wrapped tightly around the page as if someone had left it for her to find. "I did not come here to serve," it said. "I came because of a promise. But you've made me wonder if I could stay for a different reason entirely." She folded it back up and pressed it to her lips, then nearly threw it into the fire. By the end of that week, her engagement had been announced. Lord Ashworth was a man of station, 32, with thinning hair and a hunting lodge in Kent. He danced without music. He spoke without looking her in the eye. He said things like, "Your waist will do nicely," and "My mother approves of your chin." He was not cruel, merely disinterested. And worse, she was beginning not to care.
"Miss Fairmont," came Marcus's voice late one evening, low and sharp as she passed him near the stairwell. "You dropped this." It was her ribbon, pale ivory, slightly crushed. He pressed it into her palm, and his fingers lingered. Not long, not inappropriately, but the contact made something under her skin jolt, like a violin string pulled too tight. "I heard," he said, voice even, "about the engagement." She met his eyes. He gave the faintest nod, a congratulations, then walked away. That night she went to the chapel, the only place in the house where no one would think to follow her. She lit one taper and sat on the back pew, clutching the letter she had written, her reply to his note, the one she hadn't dared send. She read it once, then again, then folded it into quarters and tucked it under the cushion of the pew where she had first learned to kneel as a child during morning prayers. Then she rose and saw him. He was standing at the far end of the chapel, just within the shadow of the colonnade, not moving, not speaking, only watching her with a strange, unreadable ache in his eyes. She froze. "I thought," he said slowly, "you would be asleep." "I couldn't sleep." "Nor I." Silence stretched between them like a taut thread, and she felt her pulse in every inch of her skin. He took one step. "Couldn't sleep." "Nor I." Silence stretched between them like a taut thread, and she felt her pulse in every inch of her skin. He took one step forward, then stopped. "You'll marry him tomorrow?" he asked. She swallowed hard. "That is the plan." "And if you didn't?" She blinked. "If you didn't?" he said again, softer this time. "What would you do instead?" The next moment arrived too quickly for thought. The door creaked. They both turned. Voices, her aunt's, approaching from the hallway. He stepped back into shadow. She picked up her shoes, and without another word, without touching, without anything, she fled. The morning of her wedding began with a scream, not from her, from the maid. Eyre had entered to draw the curtains, then staggered backward as if she'd seen a ghost. The room was empty. No gown on the hanger, no shoes by the fire, no bride in the bed. They found Eleanor in the garden, barefoot, in her nightdress, kneeling beside the fountain with her hands in the water. Eyes vacant, lips moving as if in prayer, but no sound came out. Only her fingers trembled, as if she were trying to remember how to feel the cold. She did not recall walking there. She did not recall sleeping at all. All she remembered was the chapel, the voice in the dark, the question she had not answered. What would you do instead? By noon, the wedding was delayed. No one would say it aloud, but the whispers had begun. Madame Chastain scolded the help, blaming undercooked duck or nerves or the chill from the old wing. Her aunt clutched a bottle of lavender water and insisted Eleanor would be fine, just overtired, nothing more. But Lord Ashworth had not come up from his carriage. He remained below, outside, pacing by the gravel drive with a stormy look in his eye. He sent a footman for a flask, then a second footman for a newspaper, then finally requested a horse be saddled in case the event were, as he put it, cancelled in favor of hysteria. Eleanor heard every word. She sat in her chamber, hair pinned but face bare, and held a glass of water she hadn't touched. Her mother leaned over her. "Do you love him?" she asked quietly. Eleanor turned her face. "No." "But you'll marry him?" She nodded. "Yes." Her mother said nothing for a long moment, then pressed a hand to her cheek and whispered, "Then make sure that yes belongs to you. Not to the family, not to the house, not to the silence you're keeping." Eleanor blinked back tears. "It's already done. It's not," her mother said softly. The chapel was dark, unlit save for the last golden flicker of a sconce near the altar. Eleanor moved like a ghost through it, shoes in hand, breath trembling, veil slipping from her hair. In her palm, a folded piece of paper, crumpled, worn soft at the edges from hours of hesitation. She tucked it beneath the old prayer cushion near the back pew. If anyone found it, they would know everything. She hadn't cried, not yet, but her jaw ached from holding back the sob that wished to drag her knees to the stone floor. She was not meant to be here. She was meant to be in the rose parlor, sipping jasmine tea and listening to Madame Chastain explain how to blush when a gentleman asked for one's hand. Instead, she was here, in the chapel, leaving behind a letter for a man who wasn't her betrothed and who was never supposed to look at her like that. 12 days earlier, he had first appeared behind the holly hedge by the kitchen wing. Not at all how a man should enter a woman's life. Not gallantly nor gallopingly, but half covered in mud, carrying a sack of grain over his back like a brute, then dropping it when he spotted her. She had not meant to smile, but she had, and he had not meant to bow, yet he did, fumbling his fingers against the hem of a jacket, too fine for a servant, too threadbare for a gentleman. "I'm told you are Miss Fairmont," he said. His voice was far too sure for a man with dirt on his cheek. She tilted her head. "And you are clearly lost," he grinned. "Then I am at least in excellent company." A breath caught in her chest, brief, ridiculous. The governess called her back inside, and that should have been the end of it. But the next morning he was still there, and the next, and the next. His name was Marcus Thorne, a new addition to the Earl's staff, brought on, she was told, to assist with the stables. Then later she heard he'd been reassigned to the steward's office, then again to the household inventories. No one seemed to know precisely where he belonged, only that he walked as if the marble floors belonged to him, and spoke like a man unafraid of being overheard. "Your cousin," he said once, pausing as he carried a vase past the west drawing room, "wishes to marry a title, not a man." She'd glanced up. "And what is it you wish for, Mr. Thorne?" He didn't answer, just held her gaze a moment too long. She heard her own heart thump in her chest and cursed it for being so loud. She tried to avoid him. For 2 days she remained in the music room, then the library. Then she asked to go walking in the garden just before dusk, hoping the house would quiet without him. But he was there too. Of course he was, standing by the crumbling statue of Athena, with one foot up on the plinth, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a worn leather ledger open in his hand. "I can. And go where?" He looked at her. "Wherever you walk." But behind them voices were rising, footsteps. Someone had seen. Someone was calling for the Earl. Ashworth's boots hit the gravel with purpose. Marcus's jaw tightened. Eleanor reached for his arm and whispered, "Run!" They ran, past the garden gate, past the empty paddock, past the disapproving stares of hedgerows and statues who had seen more marriages than love. The wind pulled at her veil, still pinned, still forgotten, and her slippers sank into the wet earth with every stride. She did not look behind her. She didn't need to. His footsteps matched hers, his breath ragged, steady. He said nothing, only opened the back gate and guided her through it, like it had all been planned. But it hadn't. That was the terrifying part. There was no carriage, no coin, no map. Only two people who had not thought anything through, except that they could not stay. They found an abandoned cart in a field, the horse, still tethered, chewing at dry grass. Someone had meant to return, perhaps. They didn't wait to find out who. He lifted her into the seat. No saddle, no reins, just rope and adrenaline. The sky shifted, gray on gray. He clucked softly to the beast, and they rolled eastward, into the rising wind, and toward a future neither of them could name. She clutched the bench. He watched the road. They did not speak until the manor was a memory behind them. "You don't have to come with me," she said. "I didn't," he answered. "I left with you." The rain came slower than expected, first as mist, then a cold, spiteful drizzle that made her shawl cling and her hair lose every pin. He offered his coat. She declined. He offered again. She accepted. It smelled like salt and ink, like whatever he had been before he arrived at her house with a grain sack and a secret. His hands gripped the rope lightly, not as a rider, but as a man used to holding more fragile things. Letters, she thought. Instruments. Promises. She wondered what he had done before this, before her. She watched his jaw clench every time the cart hit a rut. He didn't wince, but he was in pain. She could see it. "Are you hurt?" she asked. He shook his head. "I'm always a little hurt," he said. "It helps me think." They passed a row of old oaks, a child's kite tangled in one of the branches, a reminder that someone else had once run through these parts, chasing something they couldn't keep. She pulled the coat tighter. They stopped at dusk by an inn with shutters half broken and a dog that barked like a warning bell. She hesitated. He looked down. "We won't stay long, just till morning." "They'll look for us," she said. "They'll expect us to head north. Then we'll go south," he replied. "To the coast? To whatever isn't home." The innkeeper was blind in one eye but didn't ask for names, just 2 shillings. "You take the bed. You'll need it more than I will." She looked at him. The man who had barely spoken above a whisper now looked as if sleep hadn't visited him in years. That night, she lay facing the wall. He sat by the window, one knee raised, the candlelight flickering against his sleeve. She knew he wasn't watching the street. He was watching the memory of a street, someplace he'd once walked, some past version of himself. "Why did you come to our house?" she asked. He took a while to answer. "I made a promise." "To whom?" "My brother." She turned. "He worked for us?" "He was meant to," Marcus said. "But he died. Before he could." The words hum. She sat up. "He served with Lord Ashworth," Marcus added, "in the regiment." Her eyes widened. "In the war?" Marcus nodded. She waited for more. He gave it. "My brother died in the field," he said. "Ashworth was in command. He left him behind." She pressed a hand to her mouth. "You came to get revenge?" "No," Marcus said. "I came to understand." "And now?" He met her gaze. "I understand enough." She stood slowly, the candle between them. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I stopped being angry the day you smiled at me." The wind howled against the shutters. She didn't move. He remained still, but something shifted. Something unspoken passed between them, like water breaking against a wall that no longer wished to stand. And in the quiet that followed, she asked a question she had never meant to say aloud. "Did you love him?" Marcus blinked. "He was my twin." Her throat tightened. "So yes." "Yes," he said. "And I hated him too, for dying when I needed him." She stepped forward. "And now?" "You're saving me." He closed his eyes. "I'm just running beside you, that's all." She didn't sleep. He sat by the window all night, arms folded, his reflection barely visible in the glass. At dawn, he rose, pulled on his coat, walked to the edge of the room and paused, then turned. "If we leave now, we can reach the bridge before noon." "What's on the other side of it?" "A place that hasn't heard your name." She stood. "Or yours." He hesitated. "There's something else you should know." She braced herself. "I'm not Marcus Thorne," he said. The words felt heavier than the room itself. She stood still by the edge of the bed, heart pounding, mouth dry. The candle between them flickered once, then straightened. "Then who are you?" she whispered. He stepped back, as if unsure.
"Your family was never titled, but we were respected. Land, books, 3 horses. My brother and I were the pride of the parish once." He paused. "Then my father fell ill, sold the land to cover debts. My brother went to seek work. Lord Ashworth took him as a personal attendant, promised security, but he brought him to war instead." She sat slowly. The floor felt uneven. The world was rearranging itself around the truth. "He left him," Julian said, voice steadier now. "In the snow. In a pass. During a retreat that was botched from the start. They said my brother was a casualty, but I read the reports. He wasn't killed by the enemy. He died waiting for Ashworth to remember he existed." He looked up. "So I joined his household, to see the kind of man my brother served, to learn if his silence was a flaw or a weapon." He exhaled. "I did not expect to find you." She reached for the bedpost, grounding herself. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't want your love to come with questions. And now I'd rather you know me fully and leave than stay beside a man I've only half been." The quiet that followed was not empty. It pulsed, alive with recognition. She had spent her life surrounded by men of station who offered no truth. Now one stood before her offering everything but certainty. "I never looked at you and saw a servant," she said, "even when I believed you were one. And I never looked at you and saw a title," he replied. "Only someone brave enough to defy one." She rose and moved to the window. Dawn was slipping in through the cracked shutters, staining the room with a soft gold. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends," he said. "There's a cottage in Dorset, my uncle's, empty, quiet, near the sea. I can mend nets. You can read by the fire. We can be no one. Or we can reclaim everything," she murmured, "not for revenge, for ourselves." He hesitated. "That land my father sold was repurchased last spring. I have a claim. If I return, I could begin again." She turned. "And now I realize I was walking toward the truth, which is that I would have loved you," she said softly, "even if you had nothing. But knowing you chose to give up everything, that's how I know it's real." He reached into his coat and pulled something from the inner lining, a ribbon, ivory, slightly frayed. "I never let go of this," he said, "even when you did." She took it, tied it slowly around her wrist like a vow. "I think," she said, "we were always going to find each other. We just had to lose everything else first." He nodded. "And now?" "Now," she whispered, "we begin."
The innkeeper's bell rang downstairs. The world was waking, but the room remained still. He leaned forward, kissed her forehead, not with urgency but with reverence. A touch that said, "I see you. I choose you. I will not vanish." She closed her eyes. The pain of the past, the weight of names, the silence of society, all of it faded. What remained was his hand in hers, a future unwritten, and the soft glow of a life that could finally begin. I stitched my name in the hem of my dress, but you never looked close enough to guess. I spoke in silence, as you spoke in stone. You were there, but I was alone. The candles burned lower than your gaze. I traced your outline through the haze. The footman saw, though he said no word, but in his eyes my ache was heard. He looked away, but I still went, by the garden gate where the wild rose faded. You never asked, but I still stayed. Even shadows know when the rain. Your mother liked my posture, not my fire. Said a quiet woman is one men admire. But he saw the storm I hid, and didn't flinch the way you did. He looked away, but I still waited, by the chapel door where the vows were braided. You never touched what I gave free. You took my hand, but not all of me. I left the slippers by the altar rail, a folded note, a silent trail. Love doesn't always speak in rings. Sometimes it leaves with smaller things. He looked away, but someone stayed, and I no longer live unafraid. The garden's quiet, the rosary grew, and I walked away to find what was new.